Off the Ball. This is News Talk.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball here on News Talk. John Duggan sitting in for Joe Malloy until 7. So at the start of the pandemic, when there was no sport, I spoke to Mario Rosenstock about his love of sport. You do know who Mario is, don't you? Well, if you don't, I'll just recap. A 13-time winner at the Mcenroe Radio Awards, a former actor in Glenroe, a comedian, an impressionist, a companion every morning for 2 decades on the Ian Dempsey Breakfast Show. Now a podcaster. Mario, how are you?
How are you, John? How are you doing?
Yeah, good. So this is Mario's Love of Sport Part 2, I think we'll call it. But before we talk about sport and your love of sport and your love of what's going on at the moment, tell us about this new podcast.
The podcast, John, I started in March, and it was something that I was dying to do. And so myself and my producer, Patrick Hawhey, who used to be the producer of The Last Word on Today FM, set out to produce this podcast. And it started in March, and we've been flying ever since. And it comes out every week. It's lighthearted, it's comic, but it can be serious. So, for example, I can go from having an interview, let's say, Battle of the Impressionists with Conor Moore, to next week having a debate about liberal and conservatism with David Quinn. So it can jump back and forth, but I'm always there. There's always comedy sketches, and I think it's always interesting.
It is the present, but it's also the future now, isn't it, this podcasting thing?
It is, John. I mean, we're speaking on the radio, of course, and I believe very much in the power of radio and the liveness of radio. But podcasts allow you to do something where you can express yourself exactly in the way that you want to express yourself, without regards, let's say, to all the different stakeholders that would be involved, namely the station owners, the tone of the station that you're working with, the sponsors, the corporate interests. You can be independent. And so that has positive sides, and it also has challenging sides, like how do you make money? But it seems that money is coming much more into the podcasting game. It's seen as a sexy business at the moment. And I know that's as reflected in Bauer Media as well, in which they're investing a lot of money in podcasts in our corner of the world, John.
Yeah, absolutely. And the best of luck with it, Mario. I've enjoyed it. I enjoyed the Eamon Dunphy one. It was a good baby.
It was a great one. Eamon and myself have always very, very good conversations. We got off to a very good start, really. One of the first times I ever had any encounters with Eamon was he was the presenter of the News Talk breakfast show. And we were coming out of Reynard's at about 3:00 in the morning. And he was with Gavin O'Reilly. And they had their arms around each other. And all I heard from behind me was the, unmistakable Dunphy voice. But he was pointing at me. He had his arm around Gavin O'Reilly. And he was pointing at me, goes, Gavin, there's the spike. There's the spike. The spike. Get him. And I put my arms around him. I went, what's the spike? And he went, you're the problem we have at 8:15 in the morning, baby. They're doing something at 8:15 in the morning that's getting in my way. You're getting in my way, baby. And so he was very annoyed that Gift Grub would seem to be taking away a lot of his listeners at exactly 8:15 every morning. But it was done in a jovial kind of way. And, Eamon has a kind of, he's a whiff of cordite. He's sparky. He's flinty. And some people don't hit it off with them. For some reason, I think I hit it off with them from the very beginning. And in a sense, he's been a real big supporter of mine. He was the first ever guest I ever had on my radio show, one of the first guests I had on my podcast. And I, of course, guested with him on his brilliant podcast, The Stand, which I would encourage people to listen to as well, because he's an all-rounder, Eamon, and he loves, British politics, European, geo-global politics, and, of course, sport and football.
And he's a national institution, and he's been on the OTB Daily Euro show. So for people who haven't heard that yet,
he is a national institution. He's one of those people, John. I mean, you and I would have had lots of conversations in bars, but also not in bars, because you and I kind of have conversations where it sounds like we're in a bar, but actually we're not in a bar, and which is one of the things I like about talking to you. And Eamon is one of those people that, I'm a very optimistic person, and I'm not a morbid person at all. But Eamon is one of those people that when he's gone, boy, we will all know about it. It's a kind of a Gay Byrne thing. I always put Vincent Brown in that kind of category as well. That kind of category that they're really much loved national treasures. And I don't use those two words easily. I don't like the expression national treasure. But Eamon is one of those important contributors to our national tone, our national culture, our vernacular, and Vincent Brown is as well. And it's these kind of people that we must celebrate now while they're around, rather than wait till afterwards when, they go.
Al Foran and Conor Moore, you feel like, were you the godfather then, having chats with these young whippersnappers?
Do you know what? I started talking to Conor Moore, and like, you'd see all his stuff going around on the web and everything, and his amazing golf impressions and his Gerlach Nan impressions and all this. And you just go, these are great impressions. I wonder would I hit it off with these guys, because they're the kind of younger generation. So I decided I'd try to get Conor Moore on anyway. And boy, did we have the crack. And the reason we had the crack, of course, is because neither of us are what I would describe as jealous creatures. So we were able to sit with each other and just blast it out and go for impressions and stories and all this. And we didn't seem to threaten each other. And same with Al Foran.
There's room at the inn.
Pardon? There's room, of course there is. But it's like, I find it's a joy listening to these people. And they obviously feel similar in looking with me. And it's just, why wouldn't we get together? It's just such fun when we get in the room. And I guarantee any of the listeners, and I know, John, you've done it, but if you listen back to the Al Foran podcast, that's the current one, that's out this week, and you hear him talking about Mike Tyson and doing Eddie Murphy and doing Joe Pesci taking out Stephen Donnelly. I'm Stephen Donnelly. He takes me out as Joe Pesci. It's just the funniest thing you'll hear. I can't, I'm laughing my head off listening to him. And same with Conor Moore. So I'm delighted. And I'm not a godfather, but I'm just a little older than them, that's all. And I'm just delighted that we can commune in the same room and do our impressions together. Because as you know, I spend most of my professional life doing my work on my own, etc. I talk to myself. If Michael D. Higgins and Pascal Donoghue and Leo Varadkar are in a sketch, it's me talking to myself as all three of them. So it's lovely and a joy to share the room with other people who are, frankly, bloody brilliant at doing their characters.
No, it's great to see, isn't it? And Irish people and getting noticed around the world.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the quality is unbelievable. I mean, when you hear Al doing his Robert De Niro, Al Foran doing his Robert De Niro, Mike Tyson, or Mark Wahlberg, God, is Mark Wahlberg maybe howl with laughter. You just go, there's no American who could do these guys any better. That's as good as it gets. And I just think it's brilliant that he's from Dublin.
When you do sporting impressions, do you have a list of favourites that you've had over the years? Do you have any, like, I know Roy Keane is a big one, but any close to your heart, or one that you feel you really got completely right?
Obviously, I mean, the Roy Keane one was really, John, was really close to my heart, because I started doing them when, nobody else was doing them. And, I started doing him in 98. And he was 27 years of age. He was captain of United. And, so nobody had really picked up on him, even though he was such an iconic figure. And so I started doing him, but I did him with a kind of an underbelly of softness, which Ian Dempsey copped onto immediately and sort of said they love that. They love the little chuckle and the little laugh and the little cuddliness, the idea that this monstrous warrior could have this soft underbelly kind of caught people. And then when Mourinho came along, Mourinho was a big one for me. And I guess it was something about the pitch of his voice, John. It was very similar to mine, and that kind of lounge singer sensibility that he had, with the slightly Slavic thing. It was very, very easy for me to pop into and pop out of. And of course, within the golden age of, Damien Duff and all these players. And it was very easy for me to do it. And it was very, it was just easy, and it just right time, right place, I guess. I guess I just captured a moment with Jose in 05, 06, I think it was. So, sport is just replete with all sorts of different characters that grab the attention, isn't it? Do
you feel you have to get one? I think your Brian Kerr is very good, and then you did Trapattoni and you did Stan. Do you feel like with every single big sporting figure that comes into the ecosystem that you have to get them?
Yeah, it's a bit like Mike Yarwood was in the 70s. He used to do Harold Wilson and all this. And as soon as Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister, Mike Yarwood was finished, because he couldn't do Margaret Thatcher for a variety of different reasons, obviously. So I suppose the same applies to me in sport. If a couple of very big sporting characters come along who are Irish, and I can't do them, and there's a couple of other people out there that could definitely do them really, really well, well then, I'm kind of, the carpet has been swept from under me in a bit. So the duty of a good impressionist is to try and nab it, try and get it. But it's not only good enough to get it. You need an angle on it, John, and that's probably, you need an angle on the character. You need to take it somewhere. Ian's always talking about that. He says, he's always telling me about it. You do the impressions, it's great. But the thing about you is you take them somewhere. And I guess that's what it is. You have to take it somewhere. I mean, if I had a penny for every time somebody dragged me by the elbow over to a guy in the bar and went, my friend does an amazing Roy Keane. And I go over to the guy and he goes, all credit to impressions at the end of the day. And I'm going, that's not Roy Keane. That's me doing Roy Keane, to be fair. That doesn't sound like Roy Keane. That sounds like Mario doing Roy Keane. Or if a fella's going, he's a good player. He's not a great player. And I'm going, no, that's kind of Gary Cook doing Eamon Dunphy. It's not you. And by the way, what are you going to say after you say he's a good player, he's not a great player? So, you have to take it somewhere. You have to have a narrative, a story, whether it's somebody going to space or somebody has a particular kind of foible that you've identified in
or
their
Daniel
character.
O'Donnell. Daniel is nothing like the Daniel O'Donnell. So you shaped him with his character.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I turned Daniel... I basically looked at Daniel O'Donnell and I went, what isn't Daniel O'Donnell? And I went, Daniel O'Donnell isn't a heavy metal loving cynic. And so basically my Daniel O'Donnell loves heavy metal, trance metal rock bands like Cradle of Filth, Infested Graveyard, and all these different bands. And he hates RTE television. And he's very cynical about all the television programs they produce and can't stand Fair City and all this. So I turned him into a kind of a cynical, kind of metal-loving lunatic, really. So...
Whereas Roy Keane is likes 80s music in your
Roy Keane loves Kajagoogoo and Lamal, and he's also particularly impecunious. So in other words, he won't buy a pint for anybody, so he'd be very careful with the cash. And so that was Roy Keane's. Yeah, he did love early 80s music. Yeah, very much so. I think at one stage he liked what was it again? Not Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. It'll come to me. It'll come to me in a minute. I'll come back.
Are you enjoying this Euros?
The Euros, yeah, John, I am enjoying the Euros. I'm enjoying it because it's a bit of fun. It's great to see the crowds back. It's great to see a sense of the crowds back. It's great to see competitive games. It's great to be in that sort of luxurious embrace of what we know as a tournament. And what I mean by that is that idea that you can watch as much football as you like, but you know that tomorrow there's going to be more. So you can gorge on it and you can be greedy and you can go, there's always Switzerland and Turkey tomorrow at 3. And it's kind of back and alien, isn't it? It's kind of a greed fest of football. However, for me, it does, and you won't like to hear this, John, but it does emphasize for me even more the ultimate decline of football in my view. I mean, I grew up playing football. I played schoolboys football. I grew up loving football, but for a long time now, I've fallen out of love with football. And this Euros is no different. In fact, it's sent me more along the scale of falling out with football.
Why is that?
For a variety of different reasons. A bit like athletics, I don't trust football anymore. I don't believe it when I see it. FIFA, Qatar, Russia.
Can you not believe Messi? Can you not believe Messi, or can you not believe Ronaldo, or these amazing players, or the way the club game is, or Manchester City, how they play the game? Can you not believe that?
Yeah, I believe that they're real. I just don't believe that the whole superstructure of football is genuine anymore. First of all, there's too much football. So, I remember being a kid, and every 4 years the Euros would happen, and every 4 years the World Cup would happen, and you tune in because you knew that football was going to be defined by that tournament. It was going to move forward during that tournament. It was going to show you things which were new during that tournament, which would define the next 4-year cycle of football. Nowadays, that doesn't happen. The Champions League defines football. Unmistakably, unequivocally, unambiguously. The Champions League is the only game in town. I wrote it down, actually, before I was going to talk to you. And I wrote down, in my view, the Euros are fourth rate at this stage. There's the Champions League, there's the indigenous leagues, there's the World Cup, and then there's the Euros. That's the way I feel about it. It's also, the quality is mediocre. The games are fun, the quality is mediocre. You look at a team like Slovakia, for example. We bemoan the quality of Ireland. Ireland could be in that tournament, no problem at all.
They could be in the Euros, absolutely, and they should be in the Euros.
Look at Slovakia, look at Hungary. We compete with those teams, no problem. And there's no point in saying to me, Mario, Hungary played us in a friendly and they weren't trying. Yes, they were. We could be in that tournament and we could be competing against teams like Slovakia. The only problem I have is, how much are France really trying? for example. How much do France really care?
No, they do care. If you look at that documentary after that World Cup, they really, really care. Pogba, they really, really cared about winning that World Cup, because that is, to me and to them, I still think they see that as the pinnacle. The disappointment, the pressure that Messi was under to win that World Cup, you'll never have that on a CV, probably not now. The joy, the tears of Ronaldo when he won that European Championship for Portugal. I think you're being a bit cynical about it, I have to say.
I am. It's just, and I don't like myself necessarily for feeling like that, but I do feel like that. And
Can you separate the avarice of football and the structures and the big organisations and the money and the fact that they just the broadcasting deals, they got to get this done during the pandemic, from the beauty of an international tournament, which international tournaments are really about actually the people who watch it, almost. That is about the fans. It's about, if they were there, it'd be about the tapestry of experiences they'd have for the rest of their lives. Being in Lille, being in Poland, it didn't go so well, but Italia 90, USA 94.
Well, I mean, you've touched on something there, John, that yes, it is about the fans and it is about being there. But being where? Being in every European capital in Europe? This is the only Euros that has ever not been played anywhere. It's been played all over Europe. It's completely...
It's a one-off, though. It is a one-off.
But you're asking me about the fans and about how they and about the celebration and experience of the Euros. This is completely spread out all around Europe, and for me that takes away big time from the quality of it. I mean, I always, Marty Whelan in the Eurovision and stuff, and you always get a taste of the local, because the Eurovision is always one place in particular, and then you get to know the foibles about the local region, and you learn about the country, and you see an atmosphere for the country, and you have your journalists based in a certain country. All of that is missing from this European Championships, and for me that takes away. I don't know about you, but for me that completely takes away from it. The fact that some teams are playing home games, 2 or 3 home games in a row. It is
a little bit unfair, the way it's all transpired. Spain weren't meant to be playing in Seville now, and actually hasn't done them any good. But it is a bit of a strange concept, which will not be repeated. I do think
it's a strange concept, and I believe it takes away from the quality of what we're watching. And the other thing is, John, I mean, you did ask me about this. I believe I do have to defend myself and stand up for myself, because I am demonstrating a level of cynicism. All right, I think that everybody grasps at straws when it comes to these kind of tournaments, whether it's poor, mediocre, whatever. People they grab at the best they can see, and they blow it up and they hype it up into something that it isn't. It's to wit, and this is going to rub you up the wrong way again. Mbappe isn't going to go down, John, as one of the top 15 players.
How do you know that? He's very young.
I just think Mbappe is not going to go down as one of the top 15 or 20 players in history. The absolute furore and the mountain that was made out of Mbappe sprinting past a practically stationary Hummels is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. It's been described as the most amazing piece of sprinting and soccer excellence that pretty much anybody's seen in the last 2 years. Rubbish. Mbappe just had a quick start on him, sprinted by him. Hummels' legs are gone. Big deal. And I think, France are prosaic in the extreme as well. I mean, I don't know if they just do barely enough to win games, or if they're just not able.
No, I would disagree.
Are they a brilliant side, John?
I think they're a very, very good team. Mbappe.
Were they better than Germany was last night?
They were better than Germany because they played a different type of game to beat Germany. They played the game they needed to play to beat Germany and keep them out the other night in a 1-0 win. Mbappe scored in a World Cup final at the age of 19. The last player to do that was Pelé. He won the game against Argentina. He's a brilliant prospect, a brilliant talent. And also, Mario, football is a better... if you look at games from 30 years ago, if you go back and watch YouTube, football is to me, very clearly a better game now. A more skillful game, a more technically superior game, and a game played at a much higher level.
Oh, it is, and that goes for every sport, John. Tennis, hurling. I mean, I watch a lot of the old hurling matches on, Air Sport or whatever, and the level of hurling in 1983 or 1977 was pathetic compared to the standards that they're able to achieve now. Athleticism, skill, all aspects. I mean, if they say wristy hurlers, they weren't wristy hurlers. They had nowhere near the skills that they have now. The conditions are better and all that sort of stuff. But what I'm referring to is not so much that. I'm referring to the whole atmosphere around the things, the hyperbole, the exaggeration. Mbappe goes by Hummels once. Basically, people can't stop talking about it. I'm talking about players on opposing teams going off and embracing each other at halftime before the game is even I think about Roy Keane and I just wonder, what would he be thinking? What does he really want to say when he sees that? I think that's pathetic, John, to be honest with you. Players embracing each other and walking off the pitch at half-time with their arms around each other, opposing players. Do you get that? Can you understand that? What would Graham Souness think about that? What would Jack Charlton think about that? Roy Keane, you're supposed to be playing against these guys. Where's the what's this?
But you talk about tennis. Is tennis not the same? Like you'd McEnroe and you Connors hating each other, and you'd all the needle there. Now it's all these nice lads, nice guys. It doesn't really matter if it's Djokovic 21 or Federer 20 or Nadal. Hasn't sport, as in the kind of the bite being taken out of sport generally, like Formula 1 doesn't have any bite, snooker doesn't have any bite.
Yes.
Isn't that the way that things have, like golf, like the Bryson DeChambeau Brooks Koepka thing, which to me is complete contrivance. The fact that that's even become a thing just shows that sport has become quite sanitised, and sport now is actually more about talent than about personality.
Yes, well pointed out, and I actually hadn't thought of those examples, but it just goes to illustrate my point even more, John. I don't like it just because it's true. I don't like to see opposing players from opposing countries or teams or clubs walking off with their arm around each other, getting selfies together, exchanging phone numbers, texts, WhatsApps, all this sort of crap, you know? I mean, I remember, in the 1982 World Cup, Stielicke, after he missed his penalty, I think it was, against the French in the semi-final, and Germany then won the penalty shootout, and these French players just lying bereft on the ground. And then, only then, would an opposing player come up, put their hand down and pick the player up at the ground and give them a quick hug and say hard luck, because the player is clearly overwrought. But every match now, these guys are just talking to each other and putting their... Maybe I'm just being grumpy, maybe I'm an old fart. I just don't get it as a feature of professional sport that I like going forward. But yes, you're right. It has tapped into all areas of the games. I mean, most notable by the Federer-Nadal rivalry, which of course they're very, very good friends. And Djokovic and Nadal get on pretty well as well. So yeah, but I don't like to see it, John. I don't like to see the sanitized thing. And you brought up DeChambeau and Brooks. I don't care if it's manufactured. Nothing can be as manufactured as Logan Paul taking on Floyd Mayweather, for God's sake. At least it's not that. If Brooks, Koepka and DeChambeau hate each other's guts, I'm all for it. And by the way, I'm a big fan of Bryson DeChambeau, and I've only decided that in the last 2 days, actually. When he did that little star jump, behind Brooks, I went, I like you, Bryson DeChambeau. Do you know why? Because you're bringing colour to the game.
But he's also laughing at himself a bit, which is good to see.
And when he was on the first tee yesterday, and he was popping the ball up and down in his hand, and he missed it. It fell out of his hand, and the crowd went, ooh.
He's inverted the perception of himself, which is interesting with Bryson DeChambeau.
I thought it was really interesting. And I think he's bringing something colourful to the game, and I think it's going to be brilliant tonight. I don't know if we're going to get onto this later.
Yeah, we'll just get onto it now. Like, listeners, if you want to get involved or with Mario Rosenstock, who's our feature interviewee today, 53106 here on Off the Ball on News Talk. I think Rory actually has a real chance now, and it's been the boy who cried wolf for 7 years with Rory McIlroy. It's been lulled into false sense of security. But yesterday he was brilliant, playing with the freedom. Can he do it tonight, do you think? Has your mood or your opinion changed over the last few days?
Well, first of all, I'd like to apologise to my listeners, to your listeners, if I'm being a bit snappy with you. Sometimes I do get a bit snappy with you, John. But it's all in the spirit of good debate, I think. But I'd love to engage with any of your listeners if they have anything to snap back at me at. So let's keep that going. Vis-a-vis Rory, I think this is going to be fascinating tonight, John. Really, really fascinating. This is the first time in a long time that Rory has put himself into real contention for a major. Not just coming from behind or coming from where he's not in contention anymore, and he actually finishes 5th or 6th. He's in now. He's in the square now tonight. The focus is on him tonight, and it's on Bryson as well. And there's, John Rahm is up there as well. It's going to be brilliant. But really, John, I really wish Rory would shut up before majors and just says what Tiger says. I'm here to win. That's it. Because no matter what Rory says, he gets himself painted into a complete psychological corner. His latest psychological corner in this US Open is, I'm playing with no pressure, the pressure's off. So now he's playing with the pressure off. But if you analyse that carefully, you'll find that the pressure being off, the pressure of thinking that the pressure is off, is even greater pressure than when the pressure is on. Think about it. If you say to yourself, I'll say to them that I'm playing with the pressure off, then when you go to bed that night, you go, oh my God, what if I don't win? What if I don't win? I'll be playing with the pressure off and I don't win. So then when the pressure's on, how will I ever win when the pressure's on? The pressure will be 3 times higher when the pressure's on. So really, he's again putting himself under too much pressure. And I believe Rory will be under a lot of pressure tonight. Rory just can't hide his emotions, John. You see the way he
the walk, the bounce in the stride yesterday was fantastic. That's what we all
Can you
love.
imagine playing poker with Rory McIlroy? You just look at his face and you're going, he's got a pair of twos. His shoulders are just slumped. Or you look at him the next round, next hand, and it's like, I'm out, Rory. You've clearly got a full house. How'd you know that? Because you were jumping around with your arms and your shoulders were bouncing up and down at the table. I mean, Rory just can't hide it. I do think he's under a lot of pressure, John. No majors in 7 years. He won 4 majors in 3 years. You tell me any other major top 7 history of golfers who between the ages of 23 and 31 won no majors. Name one. You can't. So, it just doesn't happen. I mean, what kind of gap is that? To be absolutely at your prime. No car crashes, He didn't walk away from the game. He's been playing solidly for the last 8 years. Won no majors. Why? So he's putting much too much pressure on himself. And in that intervening time, of course, the obvious has happened. Loads and loads and loads of players have won individual majors. From your Brooks Koepkas to your Bryson DeChambeaus to your Justin Thomases, Jason Days. All of these players are now capable of winning majors. Whereas Rory could have been in a position to do what Tiger Woods did, which is basically shut people out and go, there's only about 3 of us capable of winning majors. Now, when you tee it up at the US Open, there's 17 players who feel they can win the majors. Jack Nicklaus, as you know, used to always say, the majors were the easiest tournaments for me to win. And they said, why? And they went, well, when I tee it up at the Canadian Open, I know that 35, 36 people think they can win that tournament. But when I tee it up at the Masters, none of those guys believe they can actually win. Only 2 or 3 of us believe it. And that's why Jack was able to win so many majors and come second in 17.
Yeah, well, let's hope Rory can do it later on. Just great news about Leona Maguire. Tied for the lead now, 20 under par.
How long to go?
She threw 5 holes with Nelly Korda.
This is amazing. Has Leona ever won a PGA title?
No, she hasn't, but she's only a rookie. And she's only young in the game. Now, she's a brilliant amateur, but 26 years of age, rookie season. She's jumped 108 places in the world rankings the last year. And
now you're talking. This would be an amazing story for Irish sport, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Never been done. And
is it a top class field?
Yeah, like Nelly Korda is 4th in the world. And they're both 20 under par through 5. And this is great from Leona, who's got Shane Lowry's former caddy, Dermot Byrne, in the bag, the Mayor Classic in Michigan, the Ladies PGA Tour, and she's up against all the best, and she's time for the lead. Leona Maguire. We'll keep you updated between now and 7 on that. You were just speaking about the tennis lads.
First of all, sorry, what do you think will happen tonight? Because I love, John, if there's one thing I love about you, John, is your bloody golf tips.
Because they're absolutely,
Tony Finau is still swimming through a lake.
He's actually joined the new version of Chicago. If you leave Finau.
Tony Finau has bought Speedos. He's been in the water so many times.
Yeah.
Listen, John, come on. Who's going to do it tonight?
John Ram.
Okay, because the newborn baby, yeah.
Yeah, the nappy factor. Right. You were just talking about Djokovic there. If Djokovic gets to 21 and he surpasses Federer and Nadal, does he become the greatest tennis player of all time? Is it about the numbers? Or I know you say Federer is, but do the numbers actually, should they matter to a degree?
Well, I'm a Federer man, so I'll obviously lay my cards on the table there. So I would believe that Federer is the best of all time. However, I'll answer your question and say that if Djokovic gets to 21 or 22 or then possibly 23, I do believe he has the right to say that he's the best of all time. Why? Because he's one of only a few players, and Federer is not one of them, who have won every major twice. That's one. The second reason would be he has a very, very strong winning record against the 2 other greatest players of all time, namely Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer. He has beaten them more times than they have beaten him. He's won Wimbledon, I think, 5 times, won the US 8 or 9 times, won the French twice, and the US 3 or 4 times. So he really would have a claim to fame to be the number one. The only thing that doesn't, that mitigates against him are 2 things. His style, which is a little robotic and a little bit athletic, physical, and lacking in grace. And 2, his personality. He's not liked like the other 2.
Does that come into the conversation about the greatest player?
No, it doesn't. But I think it comes. But I think popularity. I think the greatest player is created by love as much as anything else, and reputation, and idolatry, and how much you're embraced by the game itself. So I do think it has a factor to play. So, for example, one of the reasons why Federer is the greatest tennis player of all time is not because he's won 20 majors, although that's big. It's because of his grace and style and all-court ability. But it's also to do with his really lovely personality, his gentleness, his naivete, his kind of almost blunt honesty about himself. One of the funniest ones I've ever seen with Federer was, I don't know if I ever told you this one, but the journalist says, Roger, how do you keep doing this? And he kind of had a little think about it, a bit like Padraig Harrington would. And he went, well, obviously there's an enormous amount of talent there. And everybody laughed in the room. And he kind of copped himself on and went, oh, what have I just said? So he didn't say it with any sense of big-headedness or boastfulness. He was actually trying to quantify what it was that made him do this all the time. And one of the things were obviously that he had an enormous talent. And it was really innocent the way he did it. And I think that's what endears him to people, that there's a kind of a little bit of a clunkiness and a naivete about Federer that people warm to. Listen, Mairead Ronan and myself talk about this all the time as well. Physically, he's also beautiful. Nobody wears tennis clothing like Federer. Nobody wears clothing like Federer. I mean, nobody could have pulled off that look in 2007 or 2008 when he came out with the Wimbledon and the jacket, the white jacket. Do you remember, John, the white jacket with the gold lapel? Yeah. Nobody could have pulled that.
Duran might have or something. But
Duran might have, yeah, or George Michael. He's a catwalk model. He looks amazing, and he's so photogenic as well. And then, of course, there's the rivalry between the two of them, the rivalry that will never be surpassed. Mcenroe and Borg only played against each other. Do you know how many times, John?
4?
13. Okay. Mcenroe and Borg played. I think Djokovic and Nadal have played 59 times. So they've gone into a different stratosphere of rivalry. So I would think, yes, Djokovic has a claim to fame, but the fact that his style is a little robotic and the fact that he's never been fully embraced by the game will also mitigate against him. But yes, if you're going to take it on pure tennis terms, he may be the greatest ever.
What are you looking forward to get lost in experience-wise when we get back to going to sporting events? Because that's the one thing, positive thing about the Euros, and that's why I'm so positive about the Euros, seeing like full stadiums in Hungary, fans coming back, and you really feel that this really, really painful 18 months for the whole country and the world is beginning to get a little bit easier, even though despite all the hardship and the pain and the suffering people have been through. What are you looking forward to not taking for granted, as it were, again?
I tell you, I'm trying to think. When you said that, I'm trying to think of two of the greatest experiences I've had. And, well, three of them. One was going to see Liverpool play with you in Anfield. That was wonderful. That whole day, from the beginning to the end of the day. When we went home on the flight on the same day, all of that day to do with sport. Liverpool Football Club brought us to that place where we did all that thing for the day. But the second thing is I'm just looking forward to being in a crowd for a match like Ireland versus New Zealand in Lansdowne Road at the Aviva. Both times, in 2013 and in 2018. Were just two of the most extraordinary events I've ever been at. Just pure noise, pure mayhem, pure chaos, you're looking at strangers and you're both thinking and feeling the same thing, and you're kind of embracing strangers kind of thing, physically, with hugging strangers. That's really what I'm looking forward to again. And I'm looking forward to the after-match pints where total strangers outside Slattery's or Smith's, whatever it is, talk to each other and share their perspectives on the match that's happened. I'm looking forward to watching the Ryder Cup with fans, with a full house of fans. With if that happens, I'm looking forward to that, because the Ryder Cup for me is one of, funnily enough, for something that's in itself a little bit contrived and a little bit, from made up from years and years ago, has turned into a compelling, for me anyway, sporting event where the two teams clearly don't like each other that much, and there's a little bit of an edge between them. And America wants to prove that its side of the tour, its side of the world, is basically the home of golf, and Europe continually snub them and overcome them. And I think the Ryder Cup is always compelling, and I absolutely adore those 3 days of the Ryder Cup. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Lions as well this summer.
Mario's the new Jimmy McGee, says John in Limerick on 53106 with all the stats. Federer is easily the best ever because he hops the ball just once per serve, as another of our texters. The Lions to me is about, once again, people getting a back catalogue for their life memories of being on tour. This to me is something that is just a means to an end. Am I being cynical now? This tour of South Africa.
It is, but I think you're missing the point. I do believe we'll get 3 fantastic tests, and isn't that what it's all about? I mean, the Lions, in theory, is the most contrived corporate thing you could imagine. However, it does produce utterly compelling sport. So, for example, the whole, you take it from, let's say, 1971, when the Lions went down to New Zealand, or 1974, where that most famous tour of all time with the Springboks. So apartheid sort of South Africa, and also the 99 call and Willie John McBride and all that, and the bonhomie and the camaraderie of the team which joined them together and overcame the Springboks, to the 2005 disaster, to the to 97 triumph in South Africa, and to the 2017 draw. It really, really produces wonderful sport, John. And one of the reasons it does is it's a little bit like the Ryder Cup. Basically, the Southern Hemisphere teams, South Africa, New Zealand and Australia, basically get the hump that the Europeans can come down and think they can do it to them. And they go, we're the home of rugby, we'll show you. And that's what makes it a really interesting tussle. And it's, of course, the whole idea of the bonding of the GB and Ireland sides to bond together to overcome this obstinate foe, But I think it's what makes it interesting. What gives it the edge? It's the hubris and obstinacy of the Southern Hemisphere, which gives it the edge against the sort of Captain Bligh, mutiny on the Bounty. We're coming down. We're going to take the island. We're going to take the island, Fletcher Christian. We're going to take it. We're going to take it. No, you will not, sir. And then the New Zealanders there, yeah, you'll take it, all right. You'll take it right up the Jaxie. So there's a real edge there, which I love. So I think you'll get some great rugby. I believe it'll be played in empty stadiums. Is that right?
Yeah.
That'll be terrible. But funnily enough, when I was watching rugby at the beginning of the pandemic, as soon as we started playing rugby was one of the sports actually that kind of I could half watch, even without a crowd, because there's nothing you can do to flinch really out of a tackle or out of a ruck. You just have to get stuck in. So there's kind of full commitment anyway. Whereas in football, there's the rhythm of football means that it is affected by the crowd. I believe football, soccer, passing movements, the tempo of it is affected by the crowd. And it can just look incredibly dull. I mean, the tippy-tappy, tiki-taka football that I've been watching for the last 10 months, without an audience, without a crowd, it's just, it's so tiring to watch. It's tiresome.
We got to leave it there, Mario. Brilliant, as always. Thank you. And we got through the last half hour with you hardly doing any impressions as well, which is pretty cool.
Thanks, John. I'll save them for our well overdue drink in the pub.
And best luck with the podcast.